Hi, so I'm Paula Long. I'm the CEO of Data Gravity. I want to thank everybody for being here, and I want to thank everybody for the help they've done in helping us launch the company. Dave Siles, our VP of Channels, is going to start us off. And I'm a CEO, but I'm a CEO who knows technology and business, so we can go as deep as you want. And the rest of the guys in the room supporting us will talk through all that when the presentation comes up.
So we have a small slide deck, just a level set, and I accidentally deleted it before I started here, so I'm just going to go grab another copy. Luckily, it's stored in Data Gravity, so I get the benefit of being able to recover that in real time.
Show off.
If you've got it, use it. So who is Data Gravity? Obviously, and in the room here, I've got a couple other colleagues that may be off camera. Myself, David Siles, Paula Long, who just introduced herself, and we have Michael White, who is our Director of Product Management, and Will Urban, who is here with us, our Technical Marketing Manager, that I think many of you may know from a previous company he may have been at in the storage industry. So Data Gravity, we are announcing last Tuesday Data Aware Storage. And Data Aware Storage is a primary storage platform that does so much more. We've changed storage from being a file container into being an asset that helps you understand and introspect the data that's stored on it. Storage virtualization, the ability to virtualize your storage is obviously, we're a flash accelerated primary storage platform, but once we have done the storage of the data, we take it further steps. We do native data protection inside the platform. We do file analytics. And then once we have it protected and analyze how it was created, we content analyze that in a full text index and return that in a rich search experience that we'll run you through in the demo and that you'll get to see. All right? Please keep it interactive. Feel free to ask questions of us. We're all here to make sure that your questions are answered before we leave. So there was a few marketing slides, but we know our audience, so we've intentionally removed any remaining marketing slides from the deck. So let's take a look at it in action. So you already saw me recover a file, but our challenge to you as we go through this demo is figure out how we're doing what we're doing. Because when we come back after it, we're going to ask you how we built it. Right? You guys are pretty smart. We'll figure out if you can understand the secret sauce. Howard is not allowed to play this game because he may have some inside information on how we do it.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
You've got file-based storage, you've got object-based storage. What are you calling this?
It's primary storage. So we do SMB, NFS, and iSCSI. We also are VMware aware storage. So we treat virtual machines as first-class citizens in this product. Okay. That said, primary storage is just where the conversation starts, not ends. Yeah, the value in Data Gravity is what you can learn and gain from the information of what we store on the platform. So I logged in here as a system administrator. This is our platform interface. We've built this interface on HTML5 technology, so there's no Java, no Flash required. You bring a device to us that speaks HTML5, you can drive our interface. Through our beta program, we had customers creating CIF shares and managing data. I did say CIF, so I'm sure I'm going to have a tip jar here. I'm going to start throwing money in. But you can manage this from an iPhone if you really want to. The interface is also unique in the fact that it's not just for the IT professional. Depending on who you are, when you log into this product, your role and the screens you get defined based on your persona. Now, I'm logged in as an IT professional. I get a rich storage administration experience. I see all the functionality to configure and administrate. If I logged in as a business end user, or if I logged in as Howard, for example, I'd only get to see my data and my insights from that data. They never had the understanding that they're logged into enterprise storage, all using the same shared interface. It's a major pivot in the storage industry that people are going to let their end users start logging into the administration interface of their storage platform. So we'll start on the storage side of the product, and we'll move past that pretty quick. But our platform, we've taken the complexity of managing storage and reduced it even more. Paula has a strong heritage from her previous company that she founded in Ecologic, where pretty much made everybody a storage administrator. Here we made everybody a storage administrator and gave them a chance to be a little bit of a data scientist at the same time. But we've taken the complexity of managing storage out of it. Automation is great. There's no knobs, nothing to twist. We take the complexity out of that and abstract that from the end user and from the IT professional. Our platform, obviously, here I'm running in a demo environment, so there's no IPMI data, but the product is very intelligent all the way down to the physical storage layer. It's fully aware of its content, of itself in operation. If it has an issue, it alerts, calls home, raises that alert, and we start remediating that problem on behalf of the customer. Now, our physical configuration, we've taken the storage controllers physically out of the storage array and moved it into a compute form factor. So our shipping configuration for version 1 is a 6U configuration, 2U data gravity compute node, and a 4U storage node.
So if you call that a container, how many containers can it scale up to?
So for version 1, this is a fixed configuration. We have 2 different flavors of it, depending on the size drive that you put into the storage chassis. It's either 48 terabytes raw or 96 terabytes.
What's the hardware based on?
It's x86 off-the-shelf hardware.
I mean, who's making hardware? Who are you buying it from?
Some of the largest OEMs in the world.
Okay.
You don't recognize that?
I do, but
We took the bezel off for a reason, because someone's going to blog what it is anyway.
well, it makes sense. I mean, it's a validation of that it's good hardware.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
It's enterprise proven. Unlike Ecologic, where we built our own hardware, technology is caught up, and we're using enterprise proven hardware.
Yeah.
And we've separated the servers from the storage, so we can get best in class servers as we want to, and the storage really is just a JBOD commodity.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to grow that.
From the same vendor.
Yeah.
We went best in class
Best in
enterprise.
class on both fronts. Yeah. Now, obviously, we're doing.
Looking at it a second time to go, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not married to.
No,
Yeah.
We're not married to a vendor either, right?
It's x86 storage bridge bay
Yep.
architecture.
Absolutely.
And there's at least 3 vendors in the place.
Yep.
Now, from the pivot of taking the controllers out of the storage form factor and moving it into compute, we obviously did that to be able to get more horsepower than you would see in a traditional storage platform. Again, our challenge to you is to figure out what we're doing under the covers and how we pull off what we do. And we'll ask those questions towards the end, but if you can't figure out, we'll walk you through our pivots. But there are some unique pivots. It's not just the fact that we're using x86 off-the-shelf hardware, how we actually leverage the inside of the controller architecture and how we've redefined that and changed that is a fundamental shift as well. It's a paradigm shift in storage.
The other thing you'll notice is we moved the SSDs to the compute, and we left the JBOD as the HDD. So we're a hybrid that can scale either way. And so you're not using 3.5-inch drive slots for your, so there's no trade-offs there, and you can scale those independently over time.
Great. The only knob, if you want to call it that, you can even tweak inside of data gravity is allocation of storage pools. Now, we've done some abstraction there where you can grow and shrink storage pools. And that's a hint you can use when you're trying to figure out exactly how we do what we do. All right. Any questions there before I move beyond storage? Because storage is really just table stakes to data gravity. So back to our storage administration interface. Again, we are a multi-protocol. We do SMB, we do NFS, we do iSCSI, and then we treat virtual machines as first-class citizens. You can create all that through a wizard-driven approach right inside this interface.
And when you say virtual machines, is that VMware Centrics or who else?
It's VMware Today.
Okay.
Yep. So if I wanted to create a new share here for Tech Field Day, I can go through, give it a name, allocate space to it, give it ownership. We are fully directory aware, so Active Directory, NIS, and LDAP today. And this is one of the unique pivots. We've truly built into the product a reimagined snapshot. So data protection is natively built into the product. So if you're familiar with the backup products in the market today and you wanted to carve a similar retention policy, grandfather, father, son type of relationship, you can do that in our product. I'll create a new policy for us. And again, if you want dailies, just take the weekly and turn them all on. Now, because we're also storage, we offer a unique perspective of protection that you don't get with traditional backup software. And that's looking at volume of change or rate of change on the system. So I can invoke a discovery point, and when I say discovery points, just think your favorite flavor of backup. It is a backup archive on a separate set of disks, fault isolated inside of our product. That's it. I created a CIF share inside the product, ready to take in data. Now, we know our audience here, and we wanted to make sure that it was very relevant to what we were searching on inside the product. So once this is done creating, I'll make a pivot and I'll pull up some pre-staged shares with data that I think will be right at home with all of you. Everybody's looking at me weird now, like what data are you talking about?
Yeah. So we're running on a virtual machine, so this is not representative of the performance of the product. But also, so on the percent change, what's important there is people have
It's a demo.
traditionally viewed storage. They want to get a recovery point objective is always based on time, and they're using time to sort of figure out two things. One of them is they want to make sure the backup window is not too long. The other one is they're trying to figure out how they capture and lose the least amount of data. With percent change, you just say, look, I don't ever want to lose more than 1% of my data. I don't have to guess on time. I can just go ahead and set up what percentage I'm willing to lose, which is pretty powerful. You can also imagine that operational based protection as being something we enhance over time. Anyway, back to Dave.
Absolutely. So if you noticed a ton of traffic over the last week from some Nashua, New Hampshire IP addresses, it's because we dumped every one of your websites into the Data Gravity platform to analyze the content that you're posting.
So what did you do yesterday? No, sorry.
We didn't stop there.
Well, that explains why my name is in small type, yeah.
And so looking into discovery points, which are our backup catalogs, we can quickly see, based on the discovery points that I took after every website was ripped down, who produces the most content around here. And Eric, I think, wins by a landslide.
Wow.
Somebody's busy.
But the thing about our reimagined snapshot is when we take a discovery point, it's zero impact.
Wait, so you guys backed up my website for me?
I did.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. If you'd like a copy, we'd be happy to sell it to you.
I can always just ask the NSA.
Well, how I get the T-shirt?
But
And
this
there's
is
a copyright infringement suit.
fair use, right? But when we took the discovery point, it happened on a isolated set of disks. And the big pivot here is we actually create a catalog against those discovery points. So you get the benefit and speed of a snapshot with the true discovery and recoverability of a backup with a full catalog. Once, are you something?
Go ahead.
Oh, no. Once we've got that into a discovery point, then we take that into a rich text, full text index engine that goes through and indexes this content. And when I pivot to the search product side of the product here in a moment, we'll be able to search on different types of content that may or may not be on your website.
So as folks know, I consider restore from a snapshot the biggest sanctioned data loss, right? Because when you restore from a snapshot, you got the one file you want, you just don't know what else you got. Your other choice is to mount snapshots on a host, diff things, try to figure out what you want to recover. With the Data Gravity array, just go search and find what you want. And you can recover at any granularity you want. You can recover by a file, you can recover by a directory, you can recover by a whole object. And you get to decide based on the data.
Except for the fact that we're at VMworld, and so the file you see is going to be a VMDK.
Or a file in a VMDK.
Or file in a virtual machine.
It's important to understand that the same way you restore that file, you restore it.
Microphone.
Sorry, Michael was trying to add some comments here. I'll let him turn the mic on.
No, Michael's trying to turn on the mic.
Yeah.
How many texts does it take?
So what I was just saying there is that the way that Paula was just talking about restoring a virtual file, and you mentioned a virtual machine, the same method, the same screen, potentially, if it was listing virtual machines, you could do the
Right, no, I
same
just wanted to make sure that you said that you were doing all of this indexing for the files within a VMDK container.
Absolutely. And with
Because that's all at VMworld we're storing.
We use
Basically.
we use the technical terms of saying we capture the inside of the virtual machine as well as the outside.
Absolutely.
So if you want to recover a VMX file because you need to make a tweak to it, then we help with that.
Okay.
So
And that indexing is, clearly for NTFS, but, some of us occasionally run some operating system other than Windows.
sure.
What other operating systems within the what other file systems within the VMDK are you indexing?
NTFS, NTFS, and NTFS. Version
but
1.
For version 1.
Oh, yeah.
But you could imagine
That's only 82% of all VMs.
That's
It's a good
exactly
place to
right.
start.
But you could imagine EXT, whatever, and you could imagine VMFS, and you could imagine a few others coming out over time, right?
Yeah.
Is this search and recover interface, is the web interface the only way to get at it, or would it be integrated into the Windows file system interface that's there?
Today it's our interface.
Yeah. Is there customer interest in that?
There is, and Mike, who was just giving some great comments there, is our product manager and captures all that feedback. We've had a lot of rich feedback from the beta program of people who tested at Data Gravity that came up more than once. So it's definitely has been heard.
Since you're mainly focusing on VMware currently, is this also a plug-in addition to vCenter, or that you have to go separately to it? Are you incorporating into the other product?
We don't have a plugin for Virtual Center, although we are a web-driven interface, and if you've made the pivot that VMware would like you to make, we're just another tab in your browser.
When we say indexing the inside of a virtual machine, is that a live virtual machine over the network, or is that a shut down virtual machine using VIX library?
No.
Or is that a
VIX.
snapshot of the virtual machine done for the index?
Yeah, so great questions. So we do all of our data protection, we do all of our data insights on a fault isolated set of disks. So from that perspective, I don't have to move any data to take a data protection of it, right? So we're truly zero impact, no backup window required data protection.
And that's the big difference, for all of this analytics between this and Northern Park Life and Varonis and
That's
all
correct.
of those guys.
So you're
Because
not
them
even touching a
crawling
VM
the file
ever.
We do have to do quiescence, so we carry a VMware snapshot long enough to take the quiescence happen, and then we release it.
Yeah, but for the indexing, you do not touch the VM. You're not inserting drivers or anything else inside the VMs.
We do have a Data Gravity Intelligence service that does the activity level tracking. However, if you choose not to run that, you still get the full container level protection, you get full file level recovery.
So that service actually lets you know who. Yeah. So if you looked at the Data Gravity product, we know who, we know when, we know how, and we know when we know what, right? We don't know necessarily why, but to know who, you have to run a filter that we've created. And that's the only way you can find out who, because we can only a single stream with a single identity without the who.
Yeah.
And some people are running with who and some people aren't. They still see the activity, they just don't know who did it.
If you're not running that service, though, then you're mounting the VM.
No. Still done from the point of storage for protection.
Yep.
You get full container protection, you get file level recovery.
And you
I'm
get
about to
full-
go in and show you some of the auditing here.
Yeah.
That audit trail to get the resolution of the user to the SID, you have to be running the Data Gravity Intelligence service.
But
You can see the activity without it.
they're moving the data to the secondary set of spindles
Right.
and then indexing it. So the act of indexing doesn't affect the performance on the primary set of spindles.
Yep.
So any other, if the reason it's got to be a storage system and not an appliance that hooks up to your NetApp is that appliance, when it hooks up to your NetApp and goes to index your 27 million files on the NetApp, takes the NetApp to its knees. Just walking the metadata, let alone opening every file and indexing all the content.
Absolutely.
Part of that, the other thing that we do on that other side that's really important to just add to what you're saying is actually it's the cracking of everything. Very important technical term there, but it's the cracking that is actually the real muscle, and that's why we have such great servers in there to handle that. But we do that all on the intelligence side to avoid impacting the primary I/O.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not the primary set of spindles, and it's the passive of the active-passive controller pair So
You're
rather
teaching
than,
them. You're teaching them. How are we going to? Okay. But we
Sorry.
like
So much for the challenge.
so much for the challenge. But you are right. That is what we're doing.
Exactly.
so rather than letting that second controller sit there waiting for a failover, put it to use.
Better use the hardware.
Yeah. So I actually have a data store here mounted to an ESX server running here with a virtual machine on it. Obviously, you see the I/O that's happening, but I can drill into that virtual machine. That virtual machine has our Data Gravity Intelligence service running on it. You can see recent activity from local user, from my account, and then from a nosy user that just happens to be on the system. Discovery point policies can be put against virtual machines independently. Now there's a protection policy against the top level data store, but virtual machines are manageable first class objects to us. You can put protection against an individual virtual machine. Right? Now, if I pivot here real quick and log into that demo virtual machine. Sometime today.
We're using VMware, or VMs, pardon me, here because we weren't sure about the internet in the room. But in the booth, we've got a very big lab that we can show you. All of this will work much quicker in the booth.
You talked about data protection. You want to talk a little bit about how you achieve that on a physical level? Erasure coding, RAID?
We are using RAID when we built our own RAID. And when we talk about when we get it to the architecture document, we'll talk about why we actually needed to build our own RAID, because we needed to be able to scale in and out. Remember Dave said we can grow and shrink? You need to be able to grow and shrink with no degradation in terms of availability. So you couldn't be degraded to grow and shrink, and you need to be able to dynamically virtualize and grow and shrink. And that wasn't available, so we wrote it.
I'll ask my follow-up questions when we get to it.
You can ask them now if you
Yes,
like.
go ahead.
What type of disk failure can you handle? Can you handle 2 drives failing at once?
We can fail 2 drives failing at once on each pool, and we can fail up to 2 metadata drives as well. So we've kept the metadata drive separate from the data drive. So we've got triple mirrored on the meta.
Are you assembling the striping as it comes, or what are you doing? So you created your own array, so you're doing something with the striping. Is the striping what you're building your side of the fence with?
We're going for full stripe write. So we actually aggregate. If you look inside the array, we actually have NVRAM, and we're collecting writes to go ahead and try to do full stripe writes. So the system is completely tuned to be basically doing write gathering at the top. It mirrors it over. Okay, so I'm telling you everything. It mirrors it over to the other side and gets the ACK. Right, and what we're trying to do is we actually keep that so that we can actually do full stripe writes. So we're not trying to write 512 bytes at a time, because you get best performance with full stripe writes. And then we've got SSD as well to accelerate.
Sorry, what's the size of the stripe?
I don't remember the stripe size, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Do you really think you're going to make it to the end before we put this apart?
No, I wanted you to. Game on. I think I can hold my own, but we'll see.
So I have a question. So we have 2 controllers, right? One's active doing the I/O workload, the other is doing the intelligence. So in the event of one of those nodes failing, and now you've got both roles on a single controller, how does that work?
So that works. What happens is the protection and the tracking continue, and we stop doing the indexing and some of the analytics until the other controller comes back. We don't lose the ability to do it, and we know exactly what's changed. So you haven't lost availability, and you haven't lost the data governance or data tracing. What we have done is we've deferred some of the analytics work.
So the I/O takes priority.
The I/O takes priority always. And data protection is right there with the I/O, because you need to know you're protected at all cost. And we size the controllers appropriately.
From a data integrity standpoint, I mean, how do you go ahead of time and like comb data and realign blocks, or how do you do garbage collection?
So we've got 2 things. From a data integrity perspective, we're actually checksumming everything, so we know if something's been modified. And then we have the ability, you're asking me how we defrag, right? When you grow and shrink, it defrags at the same time. So the next grow or the next shrink, you'll defrag. And you'll grow based on I/O or based on space.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And shrink is not automatic, because if you just deleted a bunch of stuff, right, the last thing you'd want me to do is shrink, right? Because you might have deleted it for a reason. So grow, you can manually grow using the UI that Dave pointed to, or you can let us automatically grow for you, and you can manually shrink.
Absolutely. So I'm stuck in demo land a little bit. I'm rebooting on the back end, and
Do you have a follow-up question?
we'll make a pivot.
Yeah, but
here.
I forgot it.
That's okay. So we've talked about storage, we've talked about data protection. I'm going to show you the audit functionality in the product, and then we're going to go into the upper level search, analytics, and trending capabilities in the product. Okay? So everything that happens in the system, we know the full content and the context of how that content was created, done in real time. It's one of the unique pivots in the product is when the data is coming in and being mirrored over into our intelligence pool, we watch how it was created and we record that. And then when we take our discovery point, we ingest that, we merge the content extracted back with that context and give you a full rich experience.
So if you think about it, a file system has to authenticate somebody, and then it has to be able to authenticate that you have the rights to read and write. So at some point into the system, you know who it is, but there's no bridge to get that information. It gets kind of dropped, right? What we do is we elevate that to actually metadata, and we capture it. As part of the feed, we capture coming over to the what we call the proactive or intelligence controller.
So if I wanted to come in, and I won't pick on Howard, but I will, I want to see everything that Howard deleted. He didn't delete anything. That's great.
I never delete anything. I am a typical user. I keep everything forever. I still have multi-mate files.
I knew that. But Howard creates documents. He's a content author. So I can see everything that Howard just created on the system. Right? And
so,
it's quick filtering that fast.
Yeah. So you care about this for compliance. HR cares about this. You care about this for data governance. If there was a leak and you were trying to figure out if Howard was the leak, of course he wouldn't be. You'd be able to see what Howard was doing.
You know me better than that.
Yeah. I know Howard doesn't
looking for
leak.
a leak, you start with me. And
Yeah, no, we know you can keep an embargo.
Yes, I can.
We've got this full audit trail, and everything that's here is exportable. So if you need to turn that over to an auditor, or maybe someone just left the company and you went in and looked at their activity trail and you saw that they data dumped everything in the marketing share, the sales share, you have that data to back up the smoking gun argument.
So one of our beta sites actually told us a horrific story of a really clever admin who they got rid of. And what she did was she opened every file and truncated it. So she basically left the file intact but zero size, and they couldn't figure out what she changed, right? So we were intrigued by people. We thought that was an interesting story and very clever because most people would have just deleted, right? She kind of knew that deletes would be findable,
but you noticed deletes right away.
Yeah.
Well, we catch it still because we catch all the truncates.
We catch all the truncates too, so we showed up for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So any questions there before we go into the discovery side of the product? Okay, great. So one of the interesting things in our product is that we have the ability to trend over data.
Yeah, so
right?
just a second. Dave, if you've noticed, Dave is going to workspaces.
Yeah, that's a good
Right,
point.
right. So what you can do is you can create, so sometimes the IT person is working on storage and sometimes they're doing discovery. So you can create individual workspaces so that you can save what you're doing and then switch context and come back. So, or if there's multiple admins, you can have views that are your own so that you're not stepping on each other or deleting each other's screens. So we call them workspaces, and you can create and delete them. And when a user logs in, they get their own workspace.
Today, do you support multi-tenancy at all?
You could imagine Workspace moving us in that direction, but not. We tried to get the world to stop so we could stuff more into V1, but it refused.
So Howard and I had an interesting conversation yesterday talking about PANs, and
Can we stop that right now? I mean, this is going to be too much information.
No, it was just that as V-experts, we have been given every article of clothing necessary other than pants.
and that's exactly what his tweet said when I downloaded everybody's tweet stream and analyzed it, right? Because we have the content and we have the context, we're able to take and start discovering things in unique pivots, right? So just by doing the search for pants over everybody's tweet stream, unfortunately, it's not the only time the topic of pants has ever come up. It was discussed last summer as well, but pants is definitely on the spike. I think the more interesting one, though, is seeing, kind of what we're here, right? We're at VMworld talking about VMware and, of course, data gravity. So, looking at your historical tweet trends, and some of them go back 3 years, you can pretty much tell, quickly by just looking at the data and the content in context when VMworld happens. And we kind of chatter about VMworld over time, but my favorite part is, this introspection here, looking at, well, data gravity's there. And we're expecting an exponential spike. So when I dump this data tonight and look at it, it should be far enough up and to the right.
So this is fun, but if you think about it, we have beta sites who are, taking POs that have part numbers in it and mapping them to part numbers. So you're trending if you bought A and did you buy B, and when did it spike? Or you're trending, what season? So you drill into that season. You're also trending, what's happening with our IP in the company. So if you've got a patent you're filing and who's reading it, or if you've got, multiple topics, for example, around virtualization, what are people looking at? So there's business, this is fun, but there's business things that people are actually doing with this in a meaningful way, which is adding value.
So with Twitter as an example, if you've got something that goes viral, can you map the trend on how it got that way?
Absolutely.
And so you'll be able to keep track of users. You can almost come up with some kind of advanced marketing plan on how to push things out.
You absolutely
We don't see that as the first or second implementation of the product. We're just showing that as a capability. We see that you'll be mining your own internal data first, because there are other products that have other things with Twitter to get live feeds.
But
we could definitely do it. We could definitely
do it on your unstructured data, though, in your organization. So if a lot of people start talking about data gravity after they've been briefed on it and start creating content around that, you can watch that spike happen.
Yep. So what you really want to think about is, this is very, I'm going to marketing and I apologize, yeah, you can shoot me in a second, very powerful for the IT person to find out kind of how people are looking at data and who's interacting with data, because one of the hardest things an IT person has to do is when they have to split a volume, move users, who do they move, how do they split it, so they can start to see who's interacting with the data and who's looking at things together and who's not. Right, so they can start to think about their migration plans, and Dave's going to show you some other things that will help along that way.
Can you comb applications like Exchange, SharePoint, SQL data?
Not today. We started with the 80% of the massive amount of data that's hard to ask questions of to start when that's the unstructured data in the world.
So we do a little bit more. You see all kinds of numbers across from us, but it's probably slightly more than 400 different data types today of unstructured data, and you can imagine one of the areas we'll be innovating is taking a lot more over time.
Absolutely.
But in theory, even though you can't do Exchange outright, you could probably take mail logs or run a text file.
Yep,
absolutely.
Absolutely. And we can see Exchange as a service. We can see the I/O it's doing. So if you were to look at, you've got 10 VMs and you're wondering which VM is causing you the trouble, you'd see Exchange service name in that map. And so you'd see Exchange, and then if there was a bunch of different Exchange files, you could start to see which of the files are hot. So you could start to see, for example, if you had a web service and the log was exponentially growing, that can't be a good sign, right? And we can't actually look into logs. And if you were to look Exchange, or if you were to look at SQL, you could see some of the interaction with some of the higher level container files. Now we can't get into the container in V1, but you can look at the container and see it growing. You can look at the container and see what the IOs are hitting which containers. So as opposed to just seeing IOPS and being blind to where those IOPS are going, we can drill it into the container or file that it's looking at. So it's a start.
I assume that you can't look into password protected files either.
We cannot look into password protected files.
It's encrypted, it's opaque. Yeah, it's ciphertext on disk.
Going back to your splitting a volume, you can almost map out that whole migration and change structure needed for that.
Yep.
Is that something you're going to consider further along to expand the analytics for something like that?
Yes, and you're going right to the screen where that would start. So.
All right.
Thank you. You're my straight man. I bet no one's ever accused you of that.
Is there any?
Is there a question?
Is there any? Is this data that you're storing encrypted by your own encryption?
We are not encrypting data today. We will have in the future encrypting drives, but we don't do that in V1.
I was just thinking if it's a hospital or something that has to store everything encrypted.
Yep.
You can't run any analytics on it, but if you've got your own encryption algorithm, then you can actually still look at it.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Once we own the keys,
Probably
we'll
would
be
have
able
been
to
encrypted already on source.
probably.
Yeah, well, you distribute the private keys, they can do what they need.
So I made a pivot into the file analytics side of our product, And it's the ability to answer that age-old question in IT, what happened to the storage when I have to buy more? The boss says, well, where did it go? Who's used it all? Because we have the content with the context of how it's being used, we're able to give that introspection natively in the product. Right? As I roll over shares and virtual machines, though, I also get a changed perspective in seeing exactly who's the top users in that space. Now, we've already determined that the top user here of our website storage space is Eric, right? By a landslide, 185 meg over everybody else. Right? But we also take and we break it out into dormant data. Right? If I click into that, I can look into not only the data that's current and active, but I can start going back and looking at saying data that hasn't been touched in X amount of time, so I can start making intelligent decisions on what data I should be possibly migrating off or cleaning up.
So you can actually, if you look, we've got a full facet. So you can find out, sort of what's the distribution of type. You can find out who read or wrote it. You can drill in on time frame. So you can get a really good view of the data. So you can say, just because something's over a year old, if your CEO wrote it, maybe you can't delete it. But if the janitor wrote it, maybe you can, right? So, or maybe you can't. But you can make some decisions. And you can also look at the content and say, if there's pending litigation, so if it's got something, with some keywords in it, don't delete it because we have to keep it. Or maybe you move it off to some archival and where you know where it is.
So I'm going to step back and we'll come back into this screen because we use that screen in other parts of our product. But when I introspect into it, then I also get a deeper dive of the data. Now the tag distribution up here at the top is once we've done that content extraction, we have a rules processing engine that looks at well-defined patterns of data. In version 1, those are fixed, so it's IP version 4, URIs, email addresses, social security numbers, and credit card numbers. But yes, if someone saves an employee document with social security numbers and a share that it shouldn't be in, we know that, we flag that, that becomes searchable, identifiable, and we can help you remediate that.
Can you do custom tags?
Not in version 1, but that's where we're going with it.
But you can do content search for those tags.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Then we also give you the breakout of the size distribution so you can see how your space is being consumed based on category, and then at the bottom you can watch it as it's consuming over time. Now this afternoon we have got one of our beta customers actually out here. There's a school district, they're doing a presentation here this afternoon on how they've been using data gravity to help the educational process. One of the interesting things they found when they copied the middle school filer over onto data gravity was just exactly how much space was consumed by stuff that probably shouldn't have been on the middle school filer, right? A lot of video files, a lot of audio files, and that introspection.
Duplicate files?
Huh?
Could you just say, I want to see everything that is a duplicate file?
We have the, we don't have.
I'm okay having that video on my filer. I'm not okay having it 60 times on my filer.
So we are actually we can't do that in V1, but we understand that that's an important feature, and you can imagine that coming out in a, and you can imagine us capturing the information as we look at the text to tell you similar, right? And it's
there's a specific Word file that has gone different directions and has 7 or 8 generations of it.
Well, actually, it's usually the marketing PowerPoint deck.
Yeah, well,
that has 27 versions.
Oh, Final 1 or Final 2 and Final 3, you mean?
Yeah.
So we don't have that feature in the product, but as you play with the product, you can actually do that, yes, but not with a feature, but using the tools. So you can actually find that one file, and then you can easily see where all the rest are. So there's a few clicks, but one day we'll have a feature that makes it even easier.
Yeah.
I see that as a use case that would have helped a lot of people already.
Sure.
Specifically when you say, oh, I got to buy a new filer, okay, what happened with it? That is like 101. Find me what is duplicate.
Yeah. And the existing tools just use file system metadata.
Yeah.
And so they go, it's the same name, it's the same size to
And
the
date.
nearest kilobyte.
Yeah, right.
And that may or may not be the same file.
Right, we're content aware. I mean, it's a great idea. Just
We
well,
have the checksums already.
yeah.
you can start with just and they have the same hash, and it's like, oh right, that's really probably the same file.
Or they have the same crypto hash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it would be really nice to get application as well as data aware, and be able to go, these 2 Word documents have 172 identical pages.
Yep. I'm smiling because Eric, who's probably watching the video, you heard this from Mark. He's heard it from me, but now he heard it from Mark. He heard it from Mike, but now he heard it from Mark. Thanks, Eric.
Well, and you'll also see who owns it. So if Judy has the PowerPoint presentation and Margaret copies it, makes her own copy, and then Fred makes a copy, and you'll see not only the docs, but
those
who
3
owns
copies have 90% of the same pages.
Yeah,
because knowledge to the level of the slide or the word processing page starts to become really powerful.
And, on Mark's comment, that's the reason I.
How did everybody start calling me Mark? I mean, it's been happening all my life, but rarely in this group.
To Howard Mark's comment, when I asked about Exchange and SharePoint, that was kind of the reason, because if you've got a template, let's say it's on a ZIF share, and it gets emailed out, and then somebody uploads it to SharePoint. You might have a couple hundred copies of that more in your environment. So.
Yeah.
So the first thing you would do is
across mailboxes and across SharePoint.
Right.
Yeah.
Saved in everybody's mailbox and in everybody's.
We'll hold updating everybody's mailbox to include a link to the one copy that's on SharePoint for 4.0.
So we're
because if you can just think about the amount of space you could drive out of a typical storage system by finding all the duplicate copies and replacing them with links.
Not just space, but I/O transactions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, once we start talking about a hybrid system, space and I/Os are related.
Right. True.
There's also a lot of legal discovery issues there too, right? I mean, if you've got fewer files in the system, the discovery process, if you ever have to go through that process, is that much faster, I would assume.
Absolutely.
And also you've got containment because you know who's read them. So as you start to figure out who has to be involved in this, you can say, these were the only 3 people who ever read this, and this is the person who wrote it. And so these are the people we have to go and do the rest of their data. Everybody else is clean.
Okay. Today, if I want to do an individual message restore from Exchange, you're going to send me to OnTrack?
Not necessarily. If it's in a virtual machine, we're going to let you recover that EDB back out, and you can use any tool you want. It doesn't have to be OnTrack, but
I can tell you a few tools that do that.
may have worked for a previous company that
I can think of 3. There's Quest and OnTrack and Veeam.
Yeah, that's right.
But 90% of the people in this position just go, yeah, we do this as a 2-hop restore. We restore the EDB, and then we'll send you to OnTrack.
You don't have to. I mean, if you're obviously using an RDM to back Exchange, we'd be able to let you temp clone that LUN on, temporarily mount it real quick, and then use any of those tools. But yeah, I mean, as we add that functionality into the product, and when we update Tech Field Day 2015, maybe a different conversation. All right, so in the interest of time, I've made the pivot into the search side of the product. And search is a keyword-driven search. When you search for a term or a file, the data comes back in a relevancy match to start with, and then those facets we've talked about in a couple of other screens get generated in real time that you can facet and pivot on the data. Now, the activity stream that we talked about a little bit ago gives you a unique pivot that you can do only in Data Gravity, is where I can say I only want to see the documents that Eric owns, but that Ethan read, right? Which would be helpful if I chose somebody who had a facet with data on it, right? So I can quickly facet that research results down to just who interacted with that file from that perspective. Right?
Earlier you said that you've got some preset, like if it's sensitive data.
Yep.
It's easy to say, what about if somebody retrieves that? I mean, do you do some sort of, I wouldn't call them and say encryption, but, warning or gray out of that information? Or can, Bob go look at it, just kind of copy them down and email them to himself or something?
Yeah, so anything that happens inside of our product is fully audited. Right? We obviously
see that he opened.
But he also had to have ACLs for it. So unless he's a super user, they had to have permissions to open it, so they could have opened it anyway. So we have a super user idea where you can open anything, but otherwise we just enforce the ACLs. And if you didn't have rights to open it, you couldn't.
So if I go to the HR share on the document,
And if I open something as that super user, do you notify somebody else?
We'll log it,
We'll log it.
right? And then depends on where you have the log messages going. But that's the same thing that they could mount it and do whatever they wanted, or they can change the permissions.
See Rogue Ed and Bob that needs to buy a new license for some software and could get approval, so he just goes and searches for a credit card number.
Yep.
You know, now he has the software. So.
Yep.
So I went to the HR share, just did a quick.
He could
But
do,
he might not
he
know
could
it's
do
there
that.
otherwise.
He could do that on the right. He might not know it's there anyway.
You know, ignorance by.
Yeah. So right. So we have exposed the fact that valuables are within these files to our nefarious.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Although
we're auditing
frankly,
and it's
once
traceable.
you employ Edward Snowden, it goes downhill really quickly.
Oh, you would have known he was reading.
Yeah.
You'd have known he was dumping.
Right.
And we have audit records, so he would be fired by the finance person the next day. Because they can't really delete those audit records, so it would be seen that they read it. So.
Since we're on this topic, I'll just mention that we would have actually not only caught him, probably, but we would have given you an export button, so you could have exported what we caught him with, so you could have sent it to security very easily.
Yep. So.
Yeah. So HR share, obviously, you may expect there to be some sensitive data there, but we do have those tags, right? So I can filter by that and saying, show me documents that just have social security numbers in it. And I could verify that that document does have social security numbers in it by previewing it. Now, just the fact that I previewed this document, obviously I have that.
It's not actually my social security number.
I was going to say if it is, it was completely randomly generated.
I just, I'm sorry, but just gotta make sure.
And it would be weird if I had one.
That is yours, right?
Now it is. I claim it.
And I'm sure you guys are thinking of asking us, did we just generate an audit entry for you looking at this? And the answer would be yes.
Absolutely. Obviously, those are your real cloud scores, though, as of this morning. But I think throughout the day, as you tweet, it'll probably change. But we have that identification, so you can quickly find that data. Now, the second question will be, who's accessed that data?
Well, who else?
But Steve, right? And if that was an issue that you needed to mitigate, I could quickly go in and pivot and actually just look at that audit trail on it and figure out who I need to go talk to that read that document. Right? I can even go to the basis of it, saying, okay, well, who created the document? Right? And obviously it was Steve, right? So, sorry, Steve.
So in this first release, though, this is really a reporting mechanism, right? Is there any plan to change this into a automated method to disable someone's account if there's suspicious activity detected? Or
you could imagine us changing the ACLs so that people can't get to something that's got data that's inappropriate, and you can imagine us disabling accounts or having rules so that accounts could be disabled if you started seeing, for example, if you had started reading stuff and all you got was no access, no access, no access, you could see maybe you wouldn't be able to mount something. Right? You could also see, because part of the thing is not just who's reading and writing it, is who's trying to.
Yep.
And then the other things you could see us doing is quarantining.
I just realized the advantage of having that now you're not only auditing, I tried to access the data, but you're in the same audit trail auditing, I accessed the backup copy of the data.
Absolutely.
Because in today's data center, there are perfectly good audit trails on the filer.
Right there. Everything that the admin's
But there's
done,
no audit
user audit
trail
action
on, I went into backup exec and I restored this file so I could see what it was.
And I know
mechanism to do that today.
the admin looked at the employee's file, right? And he did it through our interface.
Yep.
How about DLP integration with third party?
Good question. So here's what's really cool, and I'm going to do a little marketing again. So if we were a storage person, you'd say, well, do you do copy on write, or do you do write? So it's one of the things we're going to look at. It's probably medium on the list. I'm joking around because there's so many things we can do with this technology, right? And so as we go on, we're going to prioritize it based on customer feedback. But
Get that.
yeah, okay. But I'm just saying, because otherwise in a storage company, we'd be having that. Do you do copy on write, or do you do reallocate on write? What applications do you snap in? There's just not a lot of features you're going to do with a speeds and feeds storage array. Here, we've got a rich roadmap, and how we take it is really going to be completely customer driven, and Mike is going to help us
And the concept of how well do you do those snapshots didn't even come to me because I'm not sharing spindles and I don't have all of the overhead.
Yeah, why do you care?
To worry about. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
A, I don't care all that much. B, I assume you've learned since Ecologic where you were so short on CPU that you made some compromises.
Hey, that was the one thing I regret.
All I always say is you can make new mistakes, but you can't repeat old ones.
You can't make old ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, it made sense in 2001 because data was actually written sequentially, but then locality of data stops being local.
Yeah.
That's my excuse. I apologize to the storage community. By the way, EQ's fixing that.
So if you're using a different set of spindles to do your analytics on, how many spindles is it? Are they equal?
We dynamically allocate. So you start with a small pool of each, and then we dynamically grow based on performance and based on capacity.
Okay. But since that's also the backup set of spindles, it's likely to be bigger.
Do you report on things like change rate of data types, things like that?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, remember in the analytics page?
Yeah, I was showing you that composite at the bottom. It shows you how it's growing over time.
Yeah, in the analytics page, there's the graph that can show you, hey, the marketing intern just put 10 terabytes of JPEGs on.
Yeah, so we show you percent. We show you growth over time.
We actually show you actual volume.
Yeah, and count as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So real quick, I want to show you recovery because we're running out of time. But it is one-click file recovery, whether it's in a virtual machine or on the file share in a CIF share. Going back to a nice SCSI line, it is that fast.
Is it for now always to original location, or could you do recovery to another location?
Download to the interface?
Yeah, download somewhere else to file share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Like a deleted recovered folder or something.
Yeah, exactly. You don't always want to overwrite the one that is currently there.
We never
overwrite. If it's there, it's time-stamped.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
A lot of times the user will start putting new data in before they realize there's something missing.
Yeah. Absolutely. So a couple other things real quick. We do bring that interaction perspective to the equation, so we can show you how people are reading and writing and interacting with each other on a topic or a data set. And if you really wanted to figure out kind of who's the content editor versus content creator, you can look at it from an experience view. And we've had beta sites that have used this to really kind of identify subject matter experts inside their organization around the topic to pull back content teams.
Say I wanted to offer Data Gravity as a service to a variety of customers. Is there a multi-tenancy way I could set this thing up?
Not at the current time, but yeah, we've kind of got that design mentality in our product.
Okay.
Right? So I know we're almost to the top of the hour, and we will.
Well, you want to just flash the architecture, and I'll do. But this isn't fair. I apologize. Why don't you go back to the other one? So let's just talk about the innovations first. So who's read the technical white paper? So there's a technical white paper out on the website. You've got to register for it, but we promise we won't bug you. And that's.
But abusing the salespeople that bug me is high on my list of joys.
Okay. But when you read it, it's actually not like normal technical white papers. It actually has a lot of content. It's not a marketing technical white paper. It actually goes through how things work and how we're differentiated. But the key to what we did was we built bridges into the storage array that didn't exist before. So as I said, as you come in and authenticate, you lost that stream of metadata that said who was reading and writing and who was authenticated and who that was. We tagged that and created that to an upper level, and we siphoned that metadata off through the B2B channel or the HA channel. As you know, in a dual controller system, all writes are mirrored. So with those writes, we're mirroring the read activity, we're mirroring the truncate and set activity, we're mirroring the user activity. And then, as you know, at a very fine grain in a storage array, what happens is you're always mirroring the writes to the other side in case of failure. And that's really fine grain. Instead of tossing those writes out, we actually use those writes or harvest those writes to create the discovery points. Now, those two innovations, really taking that fine grain write, because if you think about what does a search appliance have to do, it has to figure out what changed. What does a DI appliance have to do? First, it's got to load the data and figure out what changed. What is somebody doing security, like a Varonis or an Elastic or something, have to do? They have to figure out what changed. We know what changed, and it's no extra performance for us to know what changed. And then we harness that power on the other side, and we build a whole new set of metadata for storage that's tiered, that's searchable, that's indexed, and that can have different relationships between the data. So we built a data platform, a metadata platform. So we didn't build a bunch of features into the array, we actually built a bunch of capabilities into the array which we can build features from. And that's sort of what we wanted to tell you guys about. I think we're running out of time.
One more question, your metadata, is that configurable to construct your own settings to go along with that, or is that locked down for your use?
For right now, we can export everything we showed you through a comma-separated file. So while you can't export the metadata itself, you can export the results. So if you wanted to see change tracking, or you wanted to see the results of a search, or you wanted to see some of the file analytics, you can export the results of the metadata that we actually did the transformations for you. You can't actually get directly at the metadata in V1. I'm not sure we're going to let you get exactly to the metadata. We're still talking about that.
What about API access to do the same thing?
It's coming.
And as the marketing guy, I want to make sure that everybody understands that all of these features are all inclusive, and we're going to be selling this at the cost of primary storage. So this isn't $1 million solution. This is a solution that's comparable in cost to primary storage with what we feel is what you should be getting out of your primary storage today.
So with EqualLogic, we basically said you shouldn't have to pay for features to manage your storage. I still believe that. And with Data Gravity, we're saying you shouldn't have to pay for features that tell you about your storage. You bought the storage, you should know what's in it, right? And you should be able to manage it effectively and use it effectively. And that's the last piece that I ended on marketing. But if you go to the technology, we do have, it's an important piece. You shouldn't have to pay to know things about things you own.
Yeah. So you said it comes in a 48 or a 96 terabyte version. How much flash is there?
What is it, 6 or 8 disks?
It's 2.4. So it's got 6. It's 2.4 and 4.8, I think. But I have to go back and look.
It's a confusing number because of the way it's used.
Right. Well, I mean, the rule of thumb for a standard hybrid array would be 10%.
It's about 10%.
But for you,
96 is the HDDs. That's not including the SSDs.
Right.
Yeah,
but for you guys, I would be saying that it's more like 5% would be the normal range.
Yeah, we're splitting.
Because half that disk capacity is going to the backup set.
Yeah.
Yep, we're splitting because you have to be able to fail over, and if you lose a pool, you have to be able to use the other pool.
Right.
But because we know about the data, we can do some effective things other people don't know, and we've got the right gathering to help you with the right performance.
We appreciate everybody's time.
We appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.